The diner's neon sign flickered against the storm outside as Nia Carter moved between tables with practiced calm. She'd spent 6 years serving coffee and avoiding questions, building a quiet life where nobody looked too closely. Then one rainy evening, a billionaire seeking anonymity walked through the door. Armed robbers stormed in demanding corporate files, and Nia's carefully hidden past surfaced the moment she spoke. Because when her voice cut through the chaos with professional crisis negotiation skills, Daniel Whitmore recognized it immediately as the voice that had once saved his company from collapse. And suddenly everyone was about to discover that this waitress had been running from something far bigger than anyone imagined. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The overhead lights in Murphy's Diner cast a warm glow across the worn linoleum floor. It was the kind of place travelers found by accident rather than intention. A small roadside establishment just outside the city limits where the coffee was strong and the pie was homemade. Most people stopped once and never returned. Some became regulars without quite knowing why. Nia Carter moved between the tables with practiced efficiency. Her movements were economical, purposeful. She wasn't the chatty type who shared life stories while refilling coffee cups, but customers seemed to appreciate her quiet attentiveness. She noticed things when someone needed a water refill before they asked, when a tired trucker wanted silence instead of small talk, when tension rose at a table and needed gentle diffusing. "More coffee, Mr. Harrison?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. The elderly regular looked up from his newspaper and nodded. "You always know, don't you?" Nia smiled softly as she poured. "Just paying attention. You seem too calm for this work," he observed, studying her over his reading glasses. "Too put together, like you're meant for something bigger." She laughed it off with practiced ease. "This suits me just fine." But as she walked away, something flickered across her face. Not quite sadness, not quite regret. More like acceptance of a choice she'd made long ago. The kind of choice that required burying parts of yourself so deep that most days you almost forgot they existed. The dinner rush had ended, leaving only a handful of customers scattered across the booths. Nia used the lull to take her break in the small back office. She pulled out her phone and counted the evening's tips carefully, separating bills into neat stacks. Every dollar mattered. Every cent had a destination. She opened her banking app and transferred $200 with a memo that read, "Marcus, tuition payment." Her younger brother was in his second year at community college, studying computer science. He'd wanted to defer and get a job when their mother got sick, but Nia wouldn't hear of it. Someone in their family was going to finish what they started. Next, she checked her email. A message from Mercy General Hospital waited in her inbox, an update on her mother's treatment plan. The experimental therapy was showing promise, but the costs kept climbing. Insurance covered some of it, but the rest fell on Nia's shoulders. She didn't mind carrying that weight. After everything her mother had sacrificed raising 2 kids alone, this was the least she could do. Still, the numbers added up in ways that made sleep difficult some nights. "Taking a break, Nia?" The manager, Tom Brennan, poked his head into the office. "Yeah, just finishing up." She closed her phone quickly. "Take your time. It's quiet tonight." He paused, then added, "You doing okay? You seem tired lately." "I'm fine, Tom." "Really?" He nodded, though his expression suggested he didn't quite believe her. Tom was a decent boss, fair, rarely demanding, content to let his staff handle things their own way as long as customers stayed happy. He'd hired Nia 8 months ago without asking too many questions about her resume gaps, and she appreciated that more than he knew. When she returned to the floor, the point-of-sale system at the register was frozen. Tom stood in front of it, jabbing buttons with increasing frustration. "It's doing that thing again," he muttered. Nia glanced at the screen and immediately recognized the problem. The payment processor timed out. "You need to restart the network connection first, then reboot the terminal." Tom blinked at her. "How do you know that?" "Just logic, I guess." She moved past him and quickly navigated through the system menus, her fingers moving with confidence that came from muscle memory rather than guesswork. Within 90 seconds, the register hummed back to life. "You secretly work in IT before this?" Tom asked, half joking. Nia shrugged. I picked things up quickly. From across the room, Sarah, another waitress, exchanged a glance with the cook. They'd noticed these moments before, times when Nia demonstrated knowledge or skills that seemed out of place in a roadside diner. She could troubleshoot technology, spoke with unusual precision when needed, and carried herself with a composure that felt almost corporate. But Nia never explained, and eventually people stopped asking. After closing out a table near the window, Nia caught her reflection in the glass. The storm outside had started, rain streaking down the panes in heavy sheets. She stared at herself for a moment. The simple uniform, the tired eyes, the face she trained to remain neutral no matter what happened around her. She barely recognized the woman looking back sometimes. That woman used to wear tailored suits and carry leather briefcases. That woman used to walk into boardrooms where millions of dollars hung in the balance and speak with authority that made powerful men listen. That woman had a different name on business cards and a reputation that opened doors across 3 continents. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Nia had made sure of it. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed, pulling her back to the present. A man stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. He was tall, probably in his mid-40s, with graying hair and the kind of expensive casual wear that tried to look ordinary but couldn't hide quality tailoring. No entourage, no obvious security, nothing flashy, but something about his bearing suggested importance. He scanned the diner briefly before choosing a corner booth, away from the windows and other customers. The kind of seat someone picks when they want privacy. Nia grabbed a menu and approached. Evening. Coffee to start. Please. Black. He looked up as he spoke, and something shifted in his expression. His eyes lingered on her face just a moment too long. Not inappropriate, but curious. Searching. I'll be right back with that. Nia kept her voice professionally neutral. As she walked away, she felt his gaze follow her. She learned to recognize different types of attention over the years. This wasn't attraction or casual interest. This was recognition trying to surface, memory struggling against time and context. She poured his coffee with steady hands and returned to the booth. Do you need a few minutes with the menu? Yes, thank you. He paused as she set down the cup. Have we met before? I don't think so. Nia's expression remained pleasant but unrevealing. Your voice. He trailed off, clearly searching his memory. It sounds familiar somehow. About one of those voices, I guess. I'll give you some time to decide. She moved away before he could press further, but she could feel the weight of his attention even as she attended to other tables. The man was Daniel Whitmore, though Nia wouldn't learn his name until later. In business circles, Daniel was known as a shrewd but ethical CEO who'd built Whitmore Industries from a regional manufacturing company into a national logistics powerhouse. He valued privacy, rarely courted media attention, and had a reputation for treating employees fairly in an industry that often didn't. He'd come to the diner deliberately seeking anonymity during a business trip that had run longer than expected. The storm had caught him between meetings, and he'd wanted somewhere quiet to think away from hotel conference rooms and corporate environments. But now, sitting in this unremarkable booth, he couldn't shake the feeling that the waitress's voice had triggered something important in his memory. The tone, the cadence, the way she carried quiet authority even in casual conversation, it all felt distinctly familiar. He'd heard that voice before. He was certain of it. But where? The diner had settled into its late evening rhythm. A couple sat in one booth sharing dessert. A lone trucker nursed coffee while scrolling through his phone. 2 men in dark jackets occupied a table near the door. They'd been there 20 minutes without ordering, which struck Nia as odd but not alarming yet. Tom seemed distracted tonight, she noticed. He kept glancing toward the door, checking his phone, wiping down the same section of counter repeatedly. Nervous energy that wasn't typical for him. Sarah approached Nia near the coffee station. Those guys by the door are weird, right? They haven't ordered anything. Maybe they're waiting for someone. Maybe. Sarah didn't sound convinced. Outside, the storm intensified. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind drove rain against the windows and waves. The diner felt smaller somehow, more isolated. The warm lighting that usually created coziness now emphasized how cut off they were from the surrounding darkness. Nia refilled Daniel's coffee without him asking. He looked up, studying her face again with that same puzzled recognition. "Thank you, Nia. Nia." He repeated her name slowly, as if testing whether it might trigger the memory he couldn't quite grasp. It didn't. "I'm Daniel." She nodded politely but didn't engage further. Some customers wanted conversation, others wanted invisibility. She'd learned to read which was which. But Daniel wasn't ready to let it go. "Do you mind if I ask what you did before working here?" The question landed carefully, almost gently, but Nia's internal defenses activated immediately. She kept her expression neutral. "Different things. Nothing particularly interesting." "You seem overqualified for—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. I just mean you carry yourself like someone with significant professional experience. We all have our stories." Nia's tone remained pleasant, but firmly closed the subject. "Let me know if you need anything else." As she walked away, Daniel watched her with increasing certainty that his instinct was correct. That voice, that bearing, they connected to something important. A crisis, a pivotal moment in his company's history. But the specific memory remained frustratingly out of reach. The atmosphere in the diner shifted suddenly. One of the men by the door stood abruptly. The other pulled something from his jacket, something metallic that caught the light wrong. Tom dropped a glass behind the counter. It shattered loudly. Then everything happened at once. The front door crashed open and two more men rushed inside, their faces covered with dark masks. One held a shotgun. The other brandished a pistol. The two men who'd been sitting near the door revealed their own weapons and moved to block the exits. "Nobody move. Nobody fucking move." A woman screamed. Chairs scraped against linoleum as customers tried to back away from the gunman. The trucker's coffee mug hit the floor and shattered. The couple in the corner booth clutched each other. For armed men, clearly coordinated. This wasn't opportunistic, this was planned. "Hands where we can see them. All of you." Panic rippled through the room like a physical force. Some customers raised their hands immediately, trembling. Others froze completely, too terrified to process what was happening. But Nia didn't scream, didn't freeze, didn't panic. Her expression shifted into something different, still calm, but now with focused intensity. She assessed the situation with a speed that suggested training rather than natural reaction. For gunmen, 12 civilians, including staff. Primary threats from a man with a shotgun and the one who seemed to be giving orders. Exit routes blocked. Window escape impractical. Her mind processed options automatically, running calculations she hadn't used in years. "Everyone stay calm," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaos without shouting. "Take slow breaths. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements." Her tone carried something beyond fear management. It held professional authority, the kind developed in high-stakes situations that demanded absolute composure. Several customers turned toward her voice instinctively, drawn to the only source of stability in the room. Their breathing slowed slightly. The immediate wave of panic began to crest rather than build. One of the gunmen, young, probably early 20s, his hand shaking noticeably on his weapon, swung toward her. "Shut up. Just shut up." Nia met his eyes steadily, keeping her hands raised and visible. "I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm just helping everyone stay calm so nobody gets hurt. That's what you want too, right? For this to go smoothly." The young man blinked, clearly not expecting that response. He looked toward the leader, uncertain. "She's right," the leader said gruffly. "Everyone stay calm, and this ends quick. We're not here to hurt anyone." Nia caught the subtle shift in his tone. Professional criminal trying to maintain control, not a violent sociopath looking for bloodshed. That information mattered. It created options. From his corner booth, Daniel Whitmore stared at Nia with sudden, sharp focus. The way she'd spoken just now, that wasn't a waitress trying to survive a robbery. That was a trained professional managing a crisis situation with practiced precision. And her voice in that moment, carrying that specific tone of calm authority. His memory finally clicked into place. 6 years ago, a hostile takeover attempt that nearly destroyed Whitmore Industries. Internal sabotage, leaked financial data, coordinated media attacks, designed to crash his stock price before a leverage buyout. His executive team had been in full panic mode, making reactive decisions that would have accelerated the collapse. Then someone had called his direct line. A consultant he'd never met, recommended by his CFO. A woman whose voice had been calm, methodical, almost hypnotic in its certainty. She talked him through each decision point, identifying the sabotage patterns, predicting the attacker's next moves, stabilizing his leadership team when everything felt like it was crumbling. She'd guided them through 3 weeks of corporate warfare from behind the scenes, never appearing in meetings, never taking public credit, just providing strategic guidance that proved devastatingly accurate. By the time the dust settled, Whitmore Industries had survived intact, and the hostile actors had withdrawn with significant losses. Daniel had wanted to thank her personally, to offer her a permanent position, but she'd disappeared. His CFO claimed she'd moved on to another client and preferred to remain anonymous. He tried to follow up several times, but eventually accepted that some professionals valued privacy over recognition. Her name had been different. Her situation had been different. But that voice, he'd heard it in his darkest professional moment, and it had been his lifeline. Now, 6 years later, in a roadside diner during an armed robbery, he was hearing it again. The gunman moved with concerning efficiency. 2 fanned out to cover the room while the leader approached Tom behind the counter. "Open the register." "Now." Tom's hands shook as he complied, fumbling with the keys. Bills and coins spilled across the counter as the gunman scooped them into a bag. But Nia noticed something important. The gunman kept glancing toward the back office. This wasn't about the few $100s in the register. They wanted something else. "Where's your office computer?" the leader demanded. Tom pointed toward the back with a trembling hand. "Through there, past the kitchen." 2 gunmen headed that direction immediately, leaving 2 to watch the customers. Nia's mind worked quickly. They wanted data, not just money. That suggested corporate espionage or targeted information theft. In a roadside diner? That made no sense unless someone had reason to believe this specific diner held information worth stealing. The young gunman near her was getting more agitated, his weapon wavering as his nervousness increased. He kept glancing at the door, then at his watch, then back at the hostages. First time doing this, Nia guessed, which made him unpredictable, dangerous in a different way than the professionals. A small boy at a nearby table began crying softly. His mother tried to quiet him, her own tears streaming silently. Nia slowly moved closer, keeping her movements visible and non-threatening. She crouched beside the booth at eye level with the child. "Hey," she said gently. "What's your name?" The boy hiccuped. "Joey." "Joey, I need you to be really brave right now, okay? Like a superhero. Can you do that for me?" He nodded slightly, his crying quieting to sniffles. "Good. Now take a deep breath with me. In through your nose." She demonstrated slowly. "Out through your mouth." "That's perfect. You're doing great." The mother mouthed thank you with desperate gratitude. But the young gunman stepped closer, agitated. "I said don't move." Nia looked up at him calmly. "I'm just keeping a child from panicking. That helps everyone, including you. Less noise, less attention, less chance of things getting complicated." Her tone carried the same professional neutrality she'd used earlier. Not challenging, not submissive, just stating facts. Crisis Management 101. Frame every action as serving mutual interests. The young man hesitated again, clearly out of his depth. He looked toward where the leader had gone, seeking guidance that wasn't available. From his booth, Daniel watched this interaction with growing certainty. This was the same woman, same voice, same psychological approach, same ability to impose calm on chaos through sheer force of competence. But why was she here? Why was a crisis consultant who'd save his company working as a waitress in a roadside diner? What had happened to her in the intervening years? The 2 gunmen emerged from the back office, carrying Tom's laptop and what looked like an external hard drive. The leader examined the drive briefly, then nodded with satisfaction. "This it?" he asked Tom. Tom nodded shakily. "That's everything. Please just take it and go." But Nia noticed Tom's expression, Not just fear, but something else. Recognition? Guilty knowledge? Her instincts told her the manager knew more about this robbery than he was admitting. The leader turned toward the room. Everyone stays exactly where they are for 10 minutes after we leave. Anyone who calls the cops before then, we'll know and we'll come back. Understood. Heads nodded frantically throughout the diner. But as the gunman began backing toward the door, the young one's phone rang. He answered quickly, his expression shifting from nervous to frightened. What? No, we got it. We're leaving now. Pause. But you said longer pause. Okay, yeah. He hung up and looked at the leader with visible distress. They want confirmation. They want to see the files before we leave. The leader's jaw tightened. We don't have time for that. They're threatening to. The young man stopped, aware that hostages could hear him. The situation had just become more complicated. Whatever entity had hired these men didn't fully trust them to complete the job, which meant the robbery was about to take longer, and with extended time came increased danger. Nia's mind raced through scenarios. Police response time to this location was probably 15 to 20 minutes. The storm would slow emergency services further. The gunmen were now trapped in an extended timeline they hadn't planned for, which would increase stress and potentially lead to violent decisions. She needed to keep everyone calm and keep the situation from escalating. Daniel caught her eye across the room. She gave him a barely perceptible look. Stay quiet, stay still, let this play out. It was subtle professional communication, the kind that happens between people who've both been trained in crisis management. And in that moment, Daniel's suspicion hardened into certainty. He leaned slightly toward her and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, I know your voice. Nia's composure flickered for just a fraction of a second. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange, Daniel saw confirmation. She knew that he knew. The leader barked into his phone. We need 20 more minutes. Can you stall? He listened, then swore under his breath. Fine. Yeah, we'll handle it. He turned to the hostages. Change of plans. Nobody leaves yet. The young gunman's hand was shaking worse now. The professional veneer was cracking. Nia could see the situation deteriorating in real time. She needed to stabilize it before panic led to violence. If you need more time, I can help keep everyone calm, she offered quietly. The leader studied her with narrowed eyes. You're awfully composed for a waitress. Panicking doesn't help anyone. I'm just trying to make this easier for everyone, including you. He considered this, then nodded slowly. Fine. Keep them quiet. Nia turned slightly toward Daniel and the other customers. Everyone, they're going to need a little more time. The best thing we can do is stay calm, stay quiet, and let them finish what they came for. Breathe slowly. Focus on staying relaxed. This will be over soon. Her voice carried that same steady authority, and remarkably, it worked. The tension in the room decreased noticeably. Breathing patterns settled. Even the young gunman seemed to relax slightly. Daniel watched her work, now seeing the professional beneath the uniform. This was crisis negotiation at its finest, managing multiple psychological pressures simultaneously, reducing threat perception while maintaining control. But he also saw something else in her face. Beneath the competence and calm, there was pain. Old pain that this situation was clearly aggravating. Whatever had driven her from corporate consulting to this diner, it hadn't been a simple career change. It had been survival. And now, 6 years later, in the middle of an armed robbery that inexplicably involved corporate data theft, her carefully constructed anonymity was crumbling. The gunman worked on a laptop, trying to access encrypted files. Tom stood behind the counter, sweating profusely, his guilt becoming more obvious by the minute. Nia caught Daniel's eye again. This time, he mouthed a silent question. Are you okay? She gave the tiniest shake of her head. No, she wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay in a very long time. But she was going to make sure everyone in this diner survived the night. That was what she did. That was who she'd always been, even when the world had decided she was someone else entirely. The storm raged outside, rain hammering the roof in waves. Inside, time stretched impossibly as everyone waited for whatever came next, their fates temporarily suspended in the hands of armed strangers and one remarkably calm waitress who'd stopped being just a waitress the moment the guns appeared. Daniel studied her one more time, certainty now absolute. When one of the gunmen became aggressive, gesturing toward a customer who'd shifted position, Nia quietly intervened with the kind of de-escalation language only someone with extensive training would use. "He's just uncomfortable," she explained calmly. "He's not trying to cause problems. If you let him adjust slightly, he'll be more cooperative. Comfortable hostages are easier to manage." The gunman considered this, then nodded. The customer shifted with visible relief. That's when Daniel couldn't stay silent anymore. Without exposing her publicly, he leaned close enough that only she could hear and asked the question burning in his mind. How does a waitress know crisis negotiation techniques? Nia met his eyes, and for just a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped. He saw exhaustion, sadness, and resignation. The expression of someone who'd been running from something for too long and just realized the race might finally be over. She didn't answer his question with words, but her silence spoke volumes. Outside, distant sirens began to wail through the storm. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the storm with increasing urgency. Inside Murphy's diner, the sound transformed the atmosphere instantly. The gunmen exchanged sharp glances, their body language shifting from controlled to tense. The leader barked orders into his phone while keeping his weapon trained on the room. Nia remained still, her expression carefully neutral, but her mind worked at lightning speed. Police arrival would force the situation into a critical phase. Cornered criminals made desperate decisions. The variables were multiplying, and with them, the danger. Daniel watched her from his booth, no longer making any effort to hide his scrutiny. The sirens had confirmed what the gunman probably already suspected. Someone had triggered a silent alarm, or a concerned passerby had called authorities. Either way, the timeline had just collapsed. The leader ended his call and turned to his crew. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they set up a perimeter. Get those files verified now." The two men at the laptop worked frantically, their fingers flying across the keyboard. The young gunman near Nia shifted his weight repeatedly, his breathing rapid and shallow. Classic panic response. "Everyone stays calm," Nia said quietly, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "The police arriving doesn't change anything for us. We stay still, we stay quiet, and we let this resolve peacefully." The leader's eyes snapped to her. "You giving orders now?" "I'm helping you," Nia replied evenly. "Panicked hostages make your situation more complicated. Calm ones make it manageable. You know that's true." He studied her for a long moment, clearly reassessing who she was. Most civilians didn't speak with that kind of composure during a crisis. Most didn't frame their suggestions in terms of mutual benefit. This waitress was either remarkably brave or remarkably trained. "Who are you really?" he asked. "Someone who wants everyone to walk out of here alive." It wasn't an answer, but the leader seemed to accept it for now. He had bigger problems than one oddly composed hostage. Daniel saw his opening. Without drawing attention from the gunman, he leaned slightly toward Nia and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk. About why you're here. About what happened 6 years ago." Nia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She didn't look at him, keeping her eyes forward, but her response was quiet and tense. "Not now. They're looking for corporate data connected to my company," Daniel continued softly. "That's not coincidence. This robbery is connected to your past, isn't it?" She finally turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes with an expression that mixed warning and pain. "Please, don't. Don't what? Don't recognize you? Don't remember that you saved my company? Don't ask why the consultant who prevented my business from collapsing is working as a waitress." His whisper was urgent, but not unkind. "Someone needs to know the truth about what happened to you." "The truth doesn't matter anymore," Nia whispered back. "I chose this life. I chose to disappear, and you need to let it stay that way, even if tonight proves you can't hide forever." The question landed heavily between them. Nia looked away, her composure cracking slightly at the edges. He was right, and she knew it. Whatever she'd been running from had just caught up to her in the worst possible way. The young gunman suddenly moved closer, his weapon raised. "Stop talking. Both of you, stop talking right now." Nia raised her hands slowly, her voice immediately shifting back to calm de-escalation mode. We're sorry. We were just trying to stay calm. We're not causing problems. I don't care. Just shut up. His voice cracked slightly, fear bleeding through the attempted authority. She could see the situation deteriorating in his body language. The way his finger rested too close to the trigger, the way his eyes darted between hostages and exits, the way his breathing had become ragged. He was seconds away from making a catastrophic mistake. What's your name? Nia asked gently. What? He seemed genuinely confused by the question. Your name. I'd like to know what to call you. I'm not telling you my name. Are you crazy? Okay, that's fine. I just thought it might help if we could talk person to person instead of just this. She gestured vaguely at the gun. What you're feeling right now, the adrenaline, the fear, the sense that everything's moving too fast, that's completely normal. Your body is trying to help you survive, but you can control it. You can slow down your breathing and think clearly. The young man stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Why are you talking to me like this? Because you don't want to be here any more than we do, Nia said simply. And because I think you're smart enough to know that hurting someone would make everything exponentially worse for you. For a moment, something shifted in his expression. The fear didn't disappear, but it became less frantic. His finger moved slightly away from the trigger. The leader noticed the exchange and intervened quickly. Marcus, go help with the laptop. I'll watch them. So his name was Marcus. The young man nodded gratefully and moved away, clearly relieved to have a task that didn't involve pointing a weapon at frightened people. The leader took his place, studying Nia with open curiosity now. Your former law enforcement? No. Military? No. Then what? Because you're not just some waitress. Nia met his gaze steadily. I used to help people solve problems. Different kinds of problems. That's all. Corporate. The word was half question, half realization. She didn't respond, which was answer enough. The leader glanced toward the laptop, where his crew was still working to decrypt files, then back at Nia. You know what we're looking for, don't you? I know you're after data that someone thinks is valuable enough to risk armed robbery during a storm with police response imminent. That's poor risk assessment, which tells me whoever hired you is desperate. A slight smile crossed the leader's face despite the situation. You're not wrong. So why take the job? Because desperate people pay well. His expression hardened. And because sometimes you don't have a choice. There was a story there Nia recognized. These weren't career criminals enjoying violence. They were people backed into corners making terrible decisions. That information mattered. It created negotiation angles. From the laptop station, one of the gunmen called out, "Files are verified. We got what we need." Relief washed visibly through the leader's posture. Good. Pack it up. But as they prepared to leave, Tom spoke for the first time since the robbery began, his voice shaking. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't know they'd actually do this. They said they just needed access to the network. They said nobody would get hurt. Every head in the diner turned toward the manager. His face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. The guilt he'd been carrying had finally broken through. Nia's eyes narrowed. Tom, what did you do? I didn't have a choice. Tom's words came out in a rush. They called me 3 weeks ago. So they knew about my gambling debts. Said they'd hurt my daughter if I didn't help them. They just wanted access to the diner's network when certain people were using it. I thought it was just data mining or something. I didn't know they'd rob us. The leader's expression darkened. You weren't supposed to say anything. I can't do this anymore. Tom was shaking now. These are innocent people. That's Joey and his mom. They come here every Tuesday. Sarah has 2 kids at home. I can't. Shut up, the leader snapped. You made your choice when you took their money. But the revelation had changed the room's dynamic. Customers now understood this wasn't random. They'd been targeted. Someone had planned this specifically. Daniel felt pieces clicking together in his mind. Corporate espionage, targeted data theft, a network compromised weeks in advance. This was sophisticated operation, not street crime. What company? He asked quietly. The leader turned toward him. What? What company hired you? Because this is corporate espionage, and I need to know who's targeting my business data. Recognition flashed across the leader's face. You're Whitmore. Daniel Whitmore. Yes. Well, shit. The leader laughed without humor. They said a VIP sometimes stopped here. Didn't realize it was you specifically. Who's that? Daniel pressed. But before the leader could respond, or refuse to respond, Nia intervened. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that the police are outside, and you need an exit strategy that doesn't end with someone getting killed. You offering to negotiate for us? The leader asked. I'm offering to help everyone survive. That includes you. The leader studied her again, this time with something approaching respect. You really did do this professionally, didn't you? Yes. For how long? Long enough to know that your current plan has a less than 20% success rate. And what's your plan? Nia took a slow breath, her mind running through scenarios. First, you need to establish communication with police. Second, you need to demonstrate good faith by releasing some hostages, children and elderly first. Third, you negotiate for safe transport in exchange for remaining hostages. Fourth, you ensure the data you came for is protected during surrender. That last part's not negotiable, the leader said firmly. We leave with the files, or we don't leave. They need to build that into your surrender terms. The police care most about hostage safety. They'll accept data transfer if it means peaceful resolution. Marcus called from near the window. There's cops setting up outside. Lots of them. The situation had reached its critical juncture. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether people lived or died. Daniel made a decision. He stood slowly, hands raised. I'm the one you came for. My data, my company. Let everyone else go and negotiate directly with me. Daniel, no, Nia said sharply. It makes sense. I'm the valuable hostage. Everyone else is just... Stop. Nia's voice carried enough authority that Daniel actually paused. She turned to the leader. He's trying to be heroic, but heroes get killed in hostage situations. You need multiple negotiation assets, not just one. Keep everyone calm and cooperative, and you maximize your leverage. The leader seemed torn between admiration and frustration. You should have been on our side of this. I'm on the side of nobody dying tonight. Outside, a loudspeaker crackled to life. This is the police. The building is surrounded. We want to resolve this peacefully. Please pick up the diner's landline to establish communication. The leader looked at his crew, then at the hostages, then at the phone behind the counter. He was smart enough to know his options had narrowed to almost nothing. Marcus, watch them. Anyone moves wrong, you shoot. He walked to the phone and picked it up. While he talked to police negotiators, Nia caught Daniel's attention again. Her expression was different now, less defensive, more resigned. She'd kept her past buried for 6 years, but it was surfacing whether she wanted it to or not. After this ends, she whispered, You're going to have questions. I already have questions. I know, and I can't stop you from asking them anymore. She paused, something painful crossing her face. But please understand, I disappeared for a reason. When you learn what happened, you'll understand why I chose to become invisible. Did someone threaten you? She didn't answer directly. I did what I had to do to protect the people I love. From what? From the people I used to work for. From the people who decided I was more valuable as a scapegoat than a consultant. Her voice dropped even lower. From the people who are probably behind tonight's robbery. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. You're saying this is connected to whatever drove you into hiding? I'm saying that data they just stole? It probably relates to the same scandal that destroyed my career. Someone's still cleaning up loose, and 6 years later. What scandal? What actually happened to you? Nia looked at him with exhausted honesty. I was framed for corporate espionage, for leaking merger data that tanked stock prices and ruined acquisitions. They had emails with my digital signature, bank transfers to offshore accounts, documented contact with competitors, all fabricated, but sophisticated enough that proving it was impossible. Who framed you? I never found out. The investigation shut down quickly. The evidence was compelling enough that fighting it would have meant legal battles I couldn't afford and media exposure that would have destroyed my family. So I took an unofficial settlement. They'd stop pursuing criminal charges if I disappeared completely from corporate consulting. I agreed. I didn't have a choice. Daniel processed this, anger building in his chest. You saved companies. You saved my company. And someone repaid you by destroying your career. Welcome to corporate warfare. Sometimes the most competent people become the biggest liabilities. Because you knew too much. Because I saw too much. Patterns. Connections. Things that made powerful people nervous. She glanced toward where the leader was still negotiating on the phone. And now, 6 years later, someone's still worried about what evidence might exist. The files thereafter probably contain proof of whatever conspiracy I accidentally uncovered, or evidence that would exonerate me. Either way, someone wants them badly enough to orchestrate this. Daniel stared at her, seeing her fully for the first time. Not the calm waitress. Not the mysterious consultant from his past, but a woman who'd been systematically destroyed by people she'd trusted and who'd spent 6 years in hiding, protecting her family from further harm. You can't let them get away with that data, he said firmly. I can't let anyone die tonight. The data is secondary to survival. What if it's your only chance to prove your innocence? The question hit Nia like a physical blow. Her carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. I gave up on proving my innocence years ago. I just want my family safe. I just want to live quietly without looking over my shoulder. You can't live like that forever. I've managed 6 years. And how many more years are you willing to hide? 10? 20? The rest of your life? Daniel's whisper was urgent but compassionate. You're not just surviving, Nia. You're barely existing. I can see it in your eyes. She turned away, blinking rapidly. He'd struck truth she'd been avoiding for years. The leader hung up the phone and returned to the group. Police want to send in a negotiator. I told them we'd release 3 hostages first as good faith. Smart, Nia said, her voice steady again despite the emotional turmoil underneath. Send the mother and child, plus 1 elderly customer. That demonstrates you're rational and willing to cooperate. You should go too, the leader said. You've got kids or family who need you. I am staying. Why? Because you'll need someone to keep the remaining hostages calm. And because, she glanced at Daniel, I have reasons to see this through. The leader studied her one more time, then nodded slowly. Your funeral. Joey and his mother were released first, followed by Mr. Harrison. As they exited into the rainy night, Nia felt a small measure of relief. 3 people safe, but 10 remained, including herself and Daniel. The police negotiator called back. The leader picked up, listened, then held the phone toward Nia. He wants to talk to someone inside who's not one of us. Someone who can verify everyone's okay. Nia took the phone carefully. Hello. This is Detective James Walsh. Are you injured? No, nobody's hurt. Can you tell me how many hostages remain? 10, including myself. For armed individuals. Are they treating you well? Yes. They're not interested in violence. They came for data, not people. That's good. What's your name? Nia hesitated. Giving her real name meant potential media coverage, meant her carefully constructed anonymity crumbling completely. But lying to police during a hostage situation seemed unwise. Nia Carter. She heard typing on the other end. The detective was probably running her name already. Would anything come up? She'd been careful to avoid any official records under her real name for years. Nia, we're going to get everyone out safely. I need you to stay calm and follow their instructions. Can you do that? Yes. Put me back on with their leader. She handed the phone back. While the leader negotiated terms, Sarah approached cautiously, keeping her hands visible. Nia, the other waitress whispered, what's happening? Why are they after corporate files in a diner? It's complicated, but we're going to be okay. You seem like you've done this before. Crisis situations. I've been through difficult things. That's all. Sarah studied her with new understanding. You're not just a waitress, are you? Right now, that's exactly what I am. But even as Nia said it, she knew it wasn't true anymore. The person she'd been before, the consultant, the crisis manager, the woman who'd walked into boardrooms and stabilized disasters. That person was surfacing despite every effort to keep her buried. Tom approached next, guilt written across every feature. Nia, I'm so sorry. I never thought. Save it, she said curtly. We'll deal with your choices later. Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what they wanted from your network. Access logs. They wanted to see who'd used the diner's Wi-Fi over the past year, specifically business accounts from major corporations. Why would corporate executives use public diner Wi-Fi? Tom's face reddened. Because I might have advertised to business travelers that we had secure, encrypted guest network. Some executives started using it for confidential calls when they didn't want to use their company networks. Privacy thing. Nia closed her eyes briefly. You created an off-books communication hub. I just wanted to attract better customers. I didn't know it would. It created a gap in corporate security protocols, a place where sensitive communications happened outside official monitoring. She looked at Daniel. Did you ever use this network? Yes, he admitted. Several times when I wanted private calls that wouldn't show up on company servers. What kind of calls? Merger discussion. Acquisition negotiations. Things that needed confidentiality before official announcements. Nia's mind raced through implications. If Daniel had discussed sensitive deals over this network, and someone had gained access to those communications, they could have used that information for insider trading, competitive intelligence, or blackmail. The data breach that destroyed my career, she said slowly. It involved leaked merger information. Information that should have been impossible to access through official channels. Daniel's eyes widened. You think someone was monitoring this network 6 years ago? I think someone created a brilliant espionage system using a roadside diner's Wi-Fi as an unofficial wiretap on corporate America's most confidential conversations. And you stumbled onto it during your consulting work. I must have. I remember flagging unusual data patterns in communication logs. I wrote a report about potential security vulnerabilities in off-network conversations. 2 weeks later, I was accused of espionage myself. They framed you to discredit your findings, and to make sure nobody took my security warnings seriously. The full picture was finally emerging. Nia had accidentally uncovered a sophisticated espionage operation. Rather than let her expose it, the people behind it had destroyed her credibility, forced her into hiding, and continued their data harvesting for years. Tonight's robbery wasn't just about stealing files. It was about eliminating the last evidence that could prove the system existed and that Nia had been innocent all along. Daniel reached out and grasped her hand. We can't let them destroy that evidence. We can't risk lives for data. This isn't just data anymore. This is your entire life, your reputation, your future. Nia looked at their joined hands, then at his face. He was right, and she knew it. She'd given up 6 years ago because fighting seemed impossible. But now, with the evidence physically present in this room and a witness who actually believed her, the impossible suddenly felt within reach. If we try to stop them from leaving with those files, she said quietly, people could get hurt. If we let them leave with the files, you stay buried forever. It was the cruelest choice, safety for others versus justice for herself. The kind of choice Nia had been making for 6 years, always choosing others, always sacrificing her own needs. But something in Daniel's expression offered a different possibility. Support. Alliance. The chance to finally stop running. The leader ended his call and gathered his crew. We've got a deal. They're bringing a van to the back entrance. We take the remaining hostages with us for 2 miles, then release them unharmed. Once we're clear, everyone goes home. Marcus looked relieved. The other gunman nodded. This was the best outcome they could have hoped for. Nia met Daniel's eyes. This was the moment. Let them leave with the evidence or fight for the truth. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the same calm authority she'd used throughout the crisis. Before you go, I need to tell you something. Those files you're taking, they contain evidence of a 6-year conspiracy. Evidence that will prove I was framed. Evidence that powerful people will kill to protect. The leader turned toward her slowly. What are you doing? I'm asking you to leave the files behind. Not for me, for the truth. Are you crazy? We get paid when we deliver these files. You get paid by people who destroy lives to protect their interests. People who won't hesitate to eliminate you once you're no longer useful. That's not my problem. It will be when they decide you know too much. The leader's expression flickered. She touched a nerve. Daniel stood beside her. I'll pay you double whatever they're offering. Triple. Name your price. You can't outbid people who print money through corporate fraud. Then keep the files as insurance, Nia suggested. Copies stored somewhere safe. If anything happens to you, the files go public. It's protection. The leader studied them both, calculating. Why should I trust you? Because unlike the people who hired you, we're not lying about who we are or what we want. The truth is simple. Those files can prove my innocence and expose a conspiracy. That makes me want them public, not buried. Marcus spoke up hesitantly. Maybe we should listen to them. I mean, if they're right about us becoming loose ends. We stick to the plan, the leader said firmly. But doubt had entered his voice. Last chance, Nia said. Walk away with the files and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or leave them behind and walk away clean. The leader's phone rang. He answered, listened, then his face went pale. Pause. Are you sure? Longer pause. Understood. He hung up and looked at his crew with an expression that mixed fear and fury. Change of plans. Our employer just tried to trigger the police assault early. They called in a tip that we're planning to execute hostages. What? Marcus sounded horrified. Why would they do that? Because dead gunmen can't testify. And if we're killed in a shootout, the files disappear in the chaos. Nia felt vindication and horror simultaneously. She'd been right, but being right meant everyone's danger had just multiplied. The leader looked at the laptop containing the stolen files, then at Nia. You really think these files prove what you're saying? I know they do. How? Because the people who framed me are desperate enough to get you killed to protect them. For a long moment, silence filled the diner. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain continued hammering the roof. The leader made his decision. Marcus, bring me the laptop. When a young man complied, the leader ejected the external hard drive and held it up. This drive stays here. We take the laptop as decoy. If police stop us, we give them a laptop and say the drive was damaged. Sound good? Nia felt tears threaten for the first time in years. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this gets us killed, I'm haunting you. He handed her the drive, then turned to his crew. We move in 30 seconds. Fast and clean. As the gunman prepared to leave, Daniel squeezed Nia's shoulder. You did it. We did it, she corrected softly. The back door opened. The leader's crew moved swiftly toward the waiting van. Police shouted for them to stop. Engines roared, and then they were gone, swallowed by rain and darkness. For several heartbeats, the remaining hostages sat frozen. Then reality crashed back. They were safe. It was over. Police rushed inside, weapons drawn, securing the scene. Detective Walsh entered and immediately approached Nia. You're the one I spoke with. Yes. Everyone okay? Yes. His eyes dropped to the hard drive in her hand. What's that? Nia looked at Daniel, then back at the detective. This was it. The moment where she stopped hiding and started fighting. Evidence, she said clearly. Evidence of corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. And proof that 6 years ago, I was framed for crimes I didn't commit. Detective Walsh's eyebrows rose. That's a serious claim. I'm making it officially. I want full investigation. I want transparency. And I want justice. Daniel stepped beside her. And I'm her witness. Plus corporate counsel. Whatever she needs. For the first time in 6 years, Nia felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The storm outside was beginning to pass. The police station hummed with activity even at 2 in the morning. Nia sat in a conference room nursing lukewarm coffee, the external hard drive resting on the table between her and Detective Walsh. Daniel occupied the chair beside her, his expensive coat draped over the back, his tie loosened after hours of preliminary statements. Through the glass partition, Nia could see officers moving between desks, phones ringing, the controlled chaos of a major incident being processed. The robbery had ended 3 hours ago, but the night felt far from over. Detective Walsh returned carrying a laptop and several evidence bags. He was in his late 40s, with graying hair and the kind of patient expression that came from years of listening to people's worst moments. He set the laptop down and opened it carefully. Before we access this drive, he said, looking directly at Nia, I need you to understand what you're claiming. corporate espionage spanning 6 years, a conspiracy to frame you, evidence of ongoing fraud. These are serious allegations that will trigger investigations involving multiple agencies. Understand, Nia replied steadily. And you're prepared for what comes with that? Media attention, your name becoming public, your life being examined in detail. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. I've been hiding for 6 years. I'm ready to stop. Walsh studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. He connected the hard drive to the laptop. The device mounted with a soft chime, revealing a directory structure filled with folders labeled by date and company name. Nia leaned forward, her heart rate increasing as she recognized patterns from her previous life. These are network access logs, she said, pointing to one folder. Records of who used the diner's Wi-Fi, when, and what domains they accessed. See these timestamps? They correspond to business hours, but the connections are flagged as personal devices, not corporate equipment. Walsh opened several files, scrolling through dense rows of data. Explain this to me like I'm not a tech expert. Daniel spoke up. Corporate executives were using the diner's network for confidential business communications because they thought it was more private than their company servers. But someone was logging everything. Every call, every file transfer, every email sent over that connection. For what purpose? Information warfare, Nia answered. If you know what companies are planning before public announcements, you can manipulate stock prices, sabotage deals, or steal competitive advantages. The financial value would be enormous. Walsh opened another folder, this one containing audio files. He clicked one randomly. A man's voice filled the room, discussing merger valuations and acquisition timelines. The quality was crystal clear. They weren't just logging metadata, Walsh said slowly. They were recording actual conversations. VoIP calls over Wi-Fi can be intercepted if you control the network, Nia explained. Someone turned Tom's Diner into a corporate wiretap operation. Executives thought they were being discreet, but they were actually being surveilled. Daniel's face had gone pale. I made calls from that diner. Confidential calls about mergers, acquisitions, executive appointments. If someone recorded those, they could have predicted your company's moves years in advance, Nia finished. They could have traded on that information, used it to undermine your negotiations, sold it to your competitors. Walsh was already making notes. We'll need forensic analysis to verify authenticity, but if this is legitimate, we're looking at potential securities fraud on a massive scale. There's more, Nia said, opening a folder labeled with dates from 6 years ago. These files correspond to the time period when I was accused of leaking merger data. Look at the access logs. Walsh leaned closer, reading through the entries. His expression changed as he processed what he was seeing. These show your credentials accessing confidential systems, he said carefully. But the IP addresses are from the diner's network, Nia confirmed. But I was never physically at the diner during those dates. I was in Chicago working a different client contract. I have hotel receipts, meeting schedules, witness testimony that proves I couldn't have been here. So someone spoofed your credentials? They cloned my digital signature and used it to access systems over a network they controlled. It created a perfect paper trail pointing to me while the real perpetrators stayed invisible. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, anger building in his voice. They destroyed your entire career with fabricated evidence, made it impossible for you to defend yourself. And when I started asking questions about unusual data patterns in corporate communications, they accelerated the frame-up to discredit me before I could expose their operation. Walsh was typing rapidly on his laptop, cross-referencing information. Do you have documentation of your original security findings? The report you mentioned? I kept backup copies of everything. Old habit from consulting work. They're stored in a secure cloud account I haven't accessed in years, but they still exist. We'll need those, along with your travel records, financial statements showing you received no unusual payments, communication logs, everything that establishes your whereabouts and activities during the time frame you were accused. For the first time in hours, Nia felt tears threatening. Someone was finally listening, finally believing, finally treating her claims as legitimate rather than desperate lies. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand gently. The gesture was simple but grounding. Walsh continued reviewing files, his expression growing increasingly serious. These logs show repeated access by multiple corporate executives from dozens of Fortune 500 companies. If someone was systematically exploiting this information, the financial damage could be in the billions, which explains why they're willing to risk armed robbery to cover their tracks, Daniel noted. Speaking of which, Walsh said, looking up, the suspects from tonight's robbery are in custody. They're cooperating in exchange for reduced charges. According to their statements, they were hired through encrypted messaging by someone using the alias architect. Payments came through cryptocurrency, untraceable routing. They never met their employer face to face. Architect, Nia repeated softly. The name triggered a fragment of memory. I've heard that term before. In corporate circles, it was sometimes used to refer to someone who structured complex deals. Someone who stayed behind the scenes, but orchestrated major moves. Daniel sat forward suddenly. 6 years ago, during the hostile takeover attempt against my company, there were rumors about a shadow player. Someone coordinating the attack across multiple fronts, financial, legal, media. My security team could never identify them, but internal memos referred to the architect's strategy. Walsh made more notes. So we're potentially looking for someone with deep corporate connections, sophisticated technical capabilities, and the resources to maintain a surveillance operation for years. And the ruthlessness to destroy anyone who threatens exposure, Nia added. A knock on the conference room door interrupted them. A younger detective poked her head inside. Walsh, you need to see this. We pulled phone records for the robbery suspects. One of them received a call 30 minutes before the assault from a number registered to a shell corporation. Can we trace the corporation? Working on it. But here's the interesting part. The same shell corporation made a payment to Thomas Brennan's offshore account 3 weeks ago. $50,000. Everyone turned toward the mention of Tom's name. The diner manager was being questioned in a different room, his cooperation bought with promises of leniency for his family's sake. Tom received payment? Nia asked. He told us he was being threatened. Maybe both, Walsh suggested. Threatened into initial cooperation, then paid to ensure silence. Classic coercion escalation. Daniel was already thinking several steps ahead. If we can trace that shell corporation back to its actual owners, we might identify the architect. Corporate structures can be layered deliberately to prevent exactly that, Nia said. But there are always weak points. Transfer patterns, signing authorities, registered addresses. Someone had to file incorporation papers. Someone had to set up bank accounts. Walsh's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. Forensic accounting team just arrived. They're going to start analyzing the hard drive data with your guidance, Ms. Carter. This could take hours. I'm not going anywhere, Nia replied. Neither am I, Daniel added. Walsh nodded. Good. Because if your theory is correct, we're about to open a case that could implicate some very powerful people. The more documentation we have before word gets out, the better. As Walsh left to coordinate with the forensic team, Nia and Daniel found themselves alone in the conference room. The weight of the night pressed down on both of them. How are you holding up? Daniel asked quietly. Nia laughed without humor. I don't know. 6 hours ago, I was serving coffee and counting tips. Now I'm potentially exposing a conspiracy that could shake the corporate world. It doesn't feel real. You've been carrying this alone for 6 years. I didn't have a choice. When the accusations first surfaced, I tried to fight back. Hired lawyers, gathered evidence, prepared to defend myself publicly. Then someone left a photo on my mother's hospital bed, a picture of my brother leaving his dorm. No note, no words. Just a clear message that fighting back meant putting my family in danger. Daniel's jaw tightened. They threatened your family? Not directly. Never anything provable. But the message was clear. Disappear quietly or the people I love get hurt. So I took the settlement, changed my life, and spent 6 years making sure nobody connected Nia, Carter the waitress, to Nia Carter, the disgraced consultant. You protected them by sacrificing yourself. It seemed like the only option at the time. She stared at the hard drive on the table. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe hiding, just let them continue hurting other people. You did what you had to do to survive. Nobody can blame you for that. I blame myself sometimes. I had evidence. I had knowledge. If I'd been braver, maybe I could have stopped this years ago. Daniel turned his chair to face her directly. Listen to me. You were up against people with unlimited resources, no conscience, and a proven willingness to destroy lives. You were one person trying to protect your family while they systematically dismantled your career. The fact that you survived it all is remarkable. I didn't survive. I just existed, going through motions, pretending to be someone I wasn't. And now, Nia met his eyes, finding something there she hadn't expected. Respect, not pity. Admiration, not judgment. Now I stopped pretending. Before Daniel could respond, Walsh returned with 2 members of the forensic team. They set up additional laptops and began the painstaking work of analyzing the hard drive's contents. Nia spent the next 2 hours walking them through network architecture, explaining corporate communication patterns, and identifying anomalies that indicated deliberate surveillance. Her expertise became increasingly apparent as she translated technical data into actionable intelligence. One of the forensic analysts, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hayes, looked up from her screen with evident surprise. Ms. Carter, your understanding of network security is extraordinary. What's your background? I used to consult on corporate crisis management and risk assessment. Network security was part of that portfolio. You should be doing this professionally, not. Dr. Hayes stopped herself, realizing the sensitive nature of the conversation. Not serving coffee. Nia finished gently. That's the goal. Eventually, as dawn approached, the team had assembled a preliminary picture. The hard drive contained evidence of systematic surveillance dating back 8 years. Over 200 corporate executives from 73 different companies had unknowingly exposed confidential information through the diner's compromised network. The financial implications are staggering, Dr. Hayes reported to Walsh. If someone traded on this information, we're looking at potential insider trading violations worth billions. Securities fraud, corporate espionage. This could be one of the largest white-collar crime cases in history. Walsh rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident despite his professional composure. We need to brief the FBI. This is beyond local jurisdiction. Agreed, Dr. Hayes replied. But we need to be careful about who we loop in. If the perpetrators have corporate connections this extensive, they might have influence within law enforcement or regulatory agencies. The sobering reality settled over the room. They were potentially fighting an enemy with resources and reach that made normal investigative work dangerous. Daniel's phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced at it and frowned. My office is getting calls from media outlets. Word is spreading about the robbery. They're asking about corporate espionage angles. Someone's leaking information, Walsh said sharply. The robbery was only hours ago. Media shouldn't have details yet. Unless someone wants to control the narrative before we can, Nia suggested. If the architect knows we have the hard drive, they might try to discredit our findings preemptively. As if on cue, Walsh's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression darkened. Pause. Forward me the link. He hung up and immediately opened his laptop, navigating to a news website. On the screen, a breaking news headline blazed. Disgraced consultant resurfaces with wild conspiracy claims after diner robbery. Nia felt her stomach drop. The article was already live, already shaping public perception. She leaned closer to read the content. Sources close to the investigation report that Nia Carter, a former corporate consultant accused of espionage in 2019, has resurfaced claiming to be the victim of an elaborate frame-up. Ms. Carter, who disappeared from public life after allegations of leaking confidential merger data, was present during tonight's armed robbery at Murphy's Diner. Law enforcement sources suggest she may be attempting to use the incident to revive discredited claims of innocence. The article continued with selective quotes from her old case, emphasizing the evidence against her while minimizing her defenses. It was character assassination disguised as news reporting. They're ahead of us, Daniel said grimly. They knew we'd go to police. They've already started undermining your credibility. Nia read through the article again, her hands trembling slightly. This was why she'd hidden for 6 years. This immediate, overwhelming assault on her character before she could even present evidence. The media machinery turning against her with surgical precision. Ms. Carter, Dr. Hayes said gently, for what it's worth, the data doesn't lie. Whatever they say about you publicly, the evidence on this drive is objective. It will speak for itself. Will it? Nia's voice was quiet but strained. Or will they find ways to discredit the evidence too? Claim it's fabricated? Suggest I planted it. Walsh leaned forward. That's why we document everything meticulously. Chain of custody. Multiple expert witnesses. Verification from independent sources. We build a case so solid that no amount of media spin can undermine it. How long will that take? Weeks. Maybe months. And in the meantime, my name gets dragged through every news cycle while the real criminals stay invisible. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we fight back. Publicly. I'll make a statement supporting your credibility. My company carries weight in corporate circles. If I vouch for you, others will listen. That could damage your reputation by association. I don't care. You saved my company once. Time I return the favor. Nia looked at him, seeing the determination in his expression. He meant it. After 6 years of fighting alone, someone was finally standing beside her. Thank you, she said softly. Another knock interrupted the moment. A uniformed officer entered. Detective Walsh? We got situation. Thomas Brennan's attorney just arrived and is demanding his immediate release. On what grounds? Claims Mr. Brennan is a victim of coercion and should be granted protective custody rather than detention. Walsh stood. I'll handle it. Dr. Hayes, continue the analysis. Ms. Carter, Mr. Whitmore, get some rest if you can. We'll reconvene in a few hours. But Nia knew rest was impossible. Her mind churned through implications and strategies. The architect had moved quickly, seeding media narratives and potentially compromising Tom's cooperation. Every hour that passed gave their opponent more time to cover tracks and consolidate defenses. She opened her phone and navigated to her secure cloud storage, the account she hadn't accessed in years. Her fingers hesitated over the login screen. Opening this meant exposing the last pieces of her old life, letting go of the safety anonymity provided. But hiding had only delayed the inevitable. The past had caught up to her in the worst possible way. Now, she had to face it completely. She logged in. The files were still there, preserved exactly as she'd left them. Security reports, communication analyses, network diagrams showing the patterns she'd identified 6 years ago. Documentation that had seemed paranoid at the time, but now looked prophetic. Daniel, she said, turning her laptop to face him. These are the original findings that got me targeted. The report I submitted 3 days before the accusation started. He read through the executive summary, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock. You identified a systematic vulnerability in corporate off-network communications. You warned that executives using unofficial channels for confidential discussions created espionage opportunities. And I specifically flagged Murphy's Diner as a potential compromise point because multiple executives from competing companies had used the same network within short time frames. The odds of that being coincidental were statistically improbable. So you literally discovered the surveillance operation by accident while doing routine security analysis. Yes. And the architect realized I was 3 steps away from exposing everything. So they framed me using the very evidence I'd been collecting to prove the conspiracy existed. Daniel sat back, running calculations in his mind. We can cross-reference your original report with the hard drive data. Show that everything you predicted 6 years ago matches what we're finding now. That establishes your credibility and proves premeditation of the frame-up. It also gives us a timeline. If we can identify which executives used the diner's network around the time I filed that report, we might find the architect among them. They spent the next hour combing through data, building connections. Dr. Hayes joined them, her expertise accelerating the analysis. Patterns emerged with increasing clarity. Look at this, Dr. Hayes said, highlighting several entries. These 5 executives all accessed the network within a 2-week window just before Ms. Carter's accusations went public. They're from different companies, different industries, but they all share one connection. They'd recently been involved in major mergers or acquisitions. Mergers that failed, Nia added, checking public records. Each one collapsed under mysterious circumstances. Stock manipulation, leaked information, regulatory complications that appeared out of nowhere. Someone was deliberately sabotaging corporate deals, Daniel realized, using the surveillance data to undermine mergers for profit, or to maintain market control, Nia suggested. If you can prevent competitors from consolidating power through strategic acquisitions, you preserve your own dominance. Dr. Hayes pulled up financial records. These failed mergers represented over $30 billion in potential market capitalization shifts. If someone could predict and prevent them, they'd have enormous influence over entire sectors. The scope of the conspiracy was expanding beyond simple espionage into economic warfare. Someone, or some group, had been systematically manipulating corporate America's structural evolution for years. We need to identify these 5 executives and determine what they have in common, Walsh said, having returned to the room. Beyond using the diner network, what connects them? Nia studied the names, her memory working through years of corporate research. I know 3 of these people professionally, or I did. They were all considered rising stars in their fields. Aggressive deal-makers, the kind of executives who climbed fast and made enemies along the way. And now, Daniel asked, 2 retired early. 1 died in a car accident. 1 moved to a competitor under mysterious circumstances. 1, Nia paused, her face paling. 1 became CEO of Meridia Holdings. What's Meridia Holdings? Walsh asked. Daniel and Nia answered simultaneously, a private equity firm. They looked at each other, the implication crystallizing between them. Meridian Holdings has been involved in hostile takeovers, corporate restructuring, and asset acquisition for the past 5 years, Daniel said slowly. They've built a reputation for knowing exactly when to strike, exactly which companies are vulnerable, exactly what leverage to apply. Because they have access to confidential information, Nia finished. Information they've been gathering through corporate surveillance for years. The final pieces were falling into place. The architect wasn't a single person. It was an organization, Meridian Holdings, built on systematic espionage and market manipulation. And the executive who'd become CEO after using the diner's network had a name, Richard Thornton. Richard Thornton's name hung in the air like a verdict. Nia stared at the screen, her mind racing through memories she'd tried to bury. She remembered him vaguely from corporate events years ago. Charming, ambitious, always working the room with calculated precision. Back then, he'd been a senior vice president at a manufacturing conglomerate, the kind of executive who seemed destined for greater things. She just hadn't realized how he'd planned to get there. I met him once, she said quietly, at a networking event in 2018. He asked about my consulting work, seemed genuinely interested in crisis management strategies. I thought he was just making conversation. He was gathering intelligence, Daniel replied, figuring out if you were a threat. Detective Walsh was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone about warrants and financial records. Dr. Hayes continued cross-referencing Meridian Holdings' business activities against the surveillance timeline, building a damning chronology of insider knowledge, translating into corporate victories. Every major acquisition Meridian made in the past 5 years came within weeks of confidential merger discussions happening over the diner's network, Dr. Hayes reported. The correlation is statistically impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Walsh ended his call and turned to the group. FBI is sending a task force. They want everything we've compiled. This is officially a federal investigation now. How long before they move on Thornton? Daniel asked. Depends on how quickly we can build an airtight case. People like him have layers of legal protection. We need irrefutable evidence before we make accusations. We have the surveillance logs, Nia said. We have my original security report warning about the vulnerability. We have proof that my credentials were spoofed from the diner's network during the exact time frame I was framed. How much more evidence do we need? Enough to overcome the best defense attorney's money can buy, Walsh replied bluntly. Enough to survive media wars and political pressure. Enough that no judge will dismiss it and no jury will doubt it. The weight of that reality settled heavily. They weren't just fighting one corrupt executive. They were taking on an entire system designed to protect powerful people from accountability. Nia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and felt her heart skip. A text from an unknown number. Stop now while you still can. She showed it to Walsh, who immediately began tracing the source. Daniel moved closer, his expression hardening with protective anger. They're trying to intimidate you, he said. They already succeeded once, Nia replied quietly. 6 years ago, threats like this made me disappear, made me choose safety over truth. And now, she met his eyes with newfound determination. Now I'm too tired to keep running, and too angry to stay silent. Another message arrived. Your brother Marcus leaves his dorm at 7:15 every morning. Your mother's treatment center has inadequate security. Think carefully. The blood drained from Nia's face. The same tactics that had worked before, targeting her family to ensure her compliance. But this time, the threat was explicit, immediate, and documented. Walsh took her phone, photographing the messages. This is evidence of witness intimidation. We can use this. They're watching my family right now, Nia said, her voice shaking. They know my brother's schedule. They know where my mother is. How do we stop them from? We put protection on your family immediately, Walsh interrupted. Local PD near your brother's campus. Security detail at your mother's facility. They won't be able to touch them. You can't guarantee that. No, Walsh admitted. But we can make it significantly harder. And we can move fast enough that Thornton doesn't have time to act before we bring him in. Daniel stood. I'm making calls. I know private security firms that specialize in executive protection. We'll have people watching your family within the hour. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay. Consider it part of my debt for what you did for my company. Nia wanted to argue, but pragmatism overruled pride. Her family's safety mattered more than her discomfort accepting help. Thank you. As Daniel stepped away to make arrangements, Dr. Hayes approached with her laptop. Ms. Carter, I need to show you something. We've been analyzing financial transfers connected to Meridian Holdings, and there's a pattern that matches the timeline of your frame-up. She pulled up bank records showing a series of offshore transfers. 3 days after you filed your security report, $2 million moved from Shell Corporation to an account registered to a law firm that specializes in corporate litigation. That same law firm later represented the companies that accused you of espionage. They paid for the legal assault against me, Nia realized. Funded the entire operation to destroy my credibility. And here's where it gets interesting, Dr. Hayes continued. The Shell Corporation that made the payment? It's owned by another Shell Corporation, which is owned by another. We traced it back through 7 layers. The ultimate owner is Meridian Holdings. Walsh leaned over to examine the records. This establishes direct financial connection between Thornton's organization and the conspiracy to frame Ms. Carter. Combined with the spoof credentials and surveillance evidence, we're building a RICO case. RICO? Nia asked. Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, Walsh explained. It's designed to prosecute organized criminal enterprises. If we can prove Meridian Holdings operated as a criminal conspiracy using surveillance, fraud, and intimidation to manipulate markets, we can go after their entire operation. For the first time since the nightmare began 6 years ago, Nia felt the possibility of complete vindication. Not just proving her innocence, but exposing the entire system that had destroyed her. The conference room door opened, and a woman in a dark suit entered. She was tall, mid-30s, with an air of absolute authority. Detective Walsh? Special Agent Christina Moore, FBI White Collar Crime Division. I understand you have evidence of systematic corporate espionage. Walsh stood to shake her hand. More than evidence. We have the entire operation documented. For the next hour, they briefed Agent Moore on everything they discovered. She listened with intense focus, asking pointed questions and taking meticulous notes. When they finished, She sat back with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction and genuine anger. Gentlemen, Ms. Carter, what you've uncovered is potentially the largest corporate espionage case in modern history. If Meridian Holdings has been operating this surveillance network for 8 years, the damage to market integrity is incalculable. What's the next step? Daniel asked. We coordinate with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and corporate fraud divisions across multiple jurisdictions. We freeze Meridian's assets, obtain warrants for their records, and bring Richard Thornton in for questioning. How long will that take? Nia asked. We can move fast. Maybe 48 hours to coordinate everything properly. 48 hours is too long, Nia said urgently. Thornton already knows we have evidence. He's already threatening my family. Every hour we wait gives him time to destroy records, move money offshore, or worse. Agent Morse studied her carefully. Ms. Carter, I understand your concern, but we need to do this correctly. A premature move could compromise the entire investigation. A delayed move could get people killed. The two women locked eyes, both understanding the stakes from different angles. Agent Moore spoke first, her tone softening slightly. What if we could accelerate the timeline? Move tonight instead of waiting. Is that possible? Walsh asked. If we have probable cause for immediate arrest, we can execute warrants without the standard waiting period. The question is whether we have sufficient evidence to justify emergency action. Dr. Hayes spoke up. The witness intimidation texts establish immediate threat. The financial records prove conspiracy. The surveillance logs demonstrate ongoing criminal activity. That should constitute probable cause. Agent Moore nodded slowly. It might be enough. Let me make some calls. While she stepped out, Nia felt Daniel's hand on her shoulder. You're doing the right thing, he said quietly, standing up instead of hiding. I'm terrified, she admitted. 6 years ago, they crushed me completely. What they do it again? 6 years ago, you were alone. Now you have federal agents, forensic evidence, and witnesses. You have me. This time is different. What if it's not enough? Then we keep fighting. But I don't think it'll come to that. Truth has momentum now. Thornton's entire empire was built on staying invisible. Once we shine light on him, it all collapses. Agent Moore returned with purposeful energy. We're greenlit for immediate action. Warrants are being drafted now. We'll have teams at Meridian Holdings offices and Thornton's residence within 3 hours. Nia felt adrenaline surge through her exhaustion. This was happening. After 6 years of hiding, justice was finally moving. I want to be there, she said. When you arrest him. Agent Moore shook her head. That's not protocol. You're a witness, not law enforcement. I need to see his face. I need him to know I didn't disappear, that I fought back. Ms. Carter, please. Nia's voice carried 6 years of suppressed pain. You're asking me to trust the system that failed me before. The least you can do is let me witness accountability. Agent Moore considered this, then glanced at Walsh, who gave a subtle nod. All right, you can observe from a surveillance van, but you stay out of sight and you follow instructions exactly. Understood. Understood. The next 2 hours passed in controlled chaos. Federal agents arrived with equipment and personnel. Warrants were finalized. Tactical plans were coordinated. Daniel arranged security for Nia's family, confirming protective details were in position at both her brother's campus and her mother's facility. As dawn broke over the city, Nia found herself in the back of an unmarked van parked across from Meridian Holdings' executive offices. Through tinted windows and camera feeds, she watched federal agents take positions around the building. Agent Moore's voice came through the radio. All teams in position. Thornton's vehicle just entered the parking garage. We move in 3 minutes. Nia's heart pounded. 3 minutes until she faced the man who destroyed her life. 3 minutes until the truth could no longer be buried. Daniel sat beside her in the van, his presence grounding. Whatever happens, you've already won, he said quietly. You survived. You're still here. That's victory in itself. I want more than survival now. I want justice. You'll get it. The radio crackled. Target is entering the building. Move now. Through the camera feeds, Nia watched federal agents converge on Meridian Holdings from multiple entry points. The coordinated precision was beautiful in its efficiency. Doors secured, personnel contained, escape routes blocked within seconds. A different camera showed Richard Thornton stepping off the elevator onto the executive floor, coffee in hand, completely unaware of what was coming. He was older than Nia remembered, gray touching his temples, but still carrying that same confident bearing. Agent Moore approached him with badge extended. Even without audio, Nia could read the shock on Thornton's face as he realized what was happening. Richard Thornton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, corporate espionage, racketeering, and witness intimidation. Agents moved swiftly, securing him. The coffee fell from his hand, splashing across expensive marble floors. His expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally cold calculation as his lawyer instincts activated. But there was something else in his face too, recognition. He knew exactly why this was happening. Knew the surveillance operation had been exposed. Knew his carefully constructed empire was collapsing. Nia watched as they led him away in handcuffs and felt something release inside her chest. A weight she'd carried for 6 years suddenly lifting. It wasn't complete healing, that would take time, but it was the beginning of freedom. Over the next several hours, the operation expanded. Federal agents executed simultaneous raids on Shell Corporation offices, offshore accounts, and the homes of Meridian executives. The scope of the conspiracy grew with each location secured. Dozens of people involved, hundreds of millions in illegal profits, thousands of intercepted communications. By mid-morning, the story had broken across every major news outlet. But this time, the narrative was different. FBI breaks massive corporate espionage ring, the headlines declared. Billions in market manipulation exposed. Surveillance network spanning 8 years dismantled. And buried within the articles, vindication. Former consultant cleared of 6-year-old espionage charges. Evidence proves she was framed to protect criminal operation. Nia read the words on her phone screen, tears streaming down her face. Her name was being restored. Her reputation was being rebuilt. The truth was finally public. Her phone rang. Her mother's number. She answered with shaking hands. Nia? Baby, I'm seeing your name on the news. What's happening? Mom, I'm okay. Everything's okay. Better than okay. The truth finally came out. You were innocent all along. Her mother's voice broke with emotion. I always knew. I always believed you. I know you did. That belief kept me going. Marcus called next, his voice excited and confused. Sis, there are security guards at my dorm, and my phone's blowing up with news alerts about you. Are you famous now? Nia laughed through tears. Not famous. Just free. Finally free. She spent the next hour fielding calls, old colleagues apologizing for doubting her, journalists requesting interviews, former clients offering support. The corporate world that had shunned her was now rushing to embrace her again. But the most meaningful call came from someone she hadn't heard from in years. Her old CFO contact who'd first connected her with Daniel's company during the crisis 6 years ago. Nia, I owe you an apology. When the accusations happened, I believed them. I should have fought harder for you. You were protecting your own career. I understand. Still, I was wrong. I want to make it right. I'm now heading corporate risk management at a Fortune 500 company. We need someone to overhaul our security protocols. Someone who actually understands how these systems can be exploited. Interested, Nia felt possibility opening before her. Real work. Meaningful work. Her expertise valued again instead of buried. Let me think about it, she said carefully. I need time to process everything first. Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. When she finally ended the call, Daniel was smiling at her. Job offers already? Apparently my services are in demand again. They always should have been. The world just needed reminding. Agent Moore approached the van with an update. Thornton's attorney is already trying to negotiate a plea deal. The evidence is so overwhelming that fighting it in court would be suicide. We're talking decades in federal prison. What about the others in his organization? Nia asked, rolling over on each other faster than we can process the statements. Everyone wants to be first to cooperate for reduced sentences. We'll have a complete picture of the conspiracy within days. And my legal status? Completely cleared. The original case against you is being officially vacated. We'll issue a formal exoneration statement this afternoon. You're free to resume your career without any cloud hanging over you. The words felt surreal. Free, exonerated, vindicated. Daniel stood and extended his hand to help her out of the van. Come on, let's get you out of this surveillance vehicle and back into the sunlight. They emerged onto the street where media cameras had gathered. Reporters shouted questions, but Agent Moore's team created space for them to move. One reporter called out, "Ms. Carter, how does it feel to be vindicated after 6 years?" Nia paused, considering her answer carefully. It feels like I can finally breathe again, like I can be myself instead of hiding. But more than that, it feels like justice, not just for me, but for everyone else who was hurt by this conspiracy. That's what matters most. Will you return to corporate consulting? I don't know yet. Right now, I'm just focused on rebuilding my life and spending time with my family. The career decisions can wait. As they walked toward Daniel's car, Nia felt sunshine on her face and realized she'd spent 6 years avoiding direct eye contact with the world. Always looking down, staying unnoticed, making herself small. Not anymore. 3 days later, Nia stood outside Murphy's Diner for the first time since the robbery. The building looked ordinary in daylight, just a roadside restaurant where ordinary things happened. But for her, it would forever be the place where her hidden life finally surfaced. Tom emerged from inside, looking older somehow despite only days passing. "Nia, I wasn't sure you'd come. You asked to see me. I figured I owed you that much. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who enabled them. If I'd been braver, if I'd gone to police when they first approached me instead of taking their money. You were protecting your daughter. I understand that choice better than anyone." Tom's eyes reddened. "The FBI offered me immunity for full cooperation. I'm testifying against everyone involved. It doesn't erase what I did, but maybe it helps. It does help. And for what it's worth, I forgive you. We both made choices to protect people we love. Sometimes there are no good options." He nodded gratefully, then gestured toward the diner. "I'm selling a place. Can't stay here after everything. But I wanted to give you something first." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check. The entire $50,000 Meridian had paid him. "I can't accept this," Nia said. "Please, it's blood money. I don't want it. Use it for your family, your career, whatever helps you rebuild. It's the least I can do." Nia looked at the check, then at Tom's earnest, guilty face. "All right, but I'm donating it to a legal fund for people wrongly accused of corporate crimes. People who can't afford the lawyers to fight back." Tom smiled sadly. "That's exactly what I'd expect from you. Thank you, Nia, for everything, for staying calm that night, for keeping people alive, for being better than the rest of us." They shook hands, and Nia walked away, feeling another piece of closure settling into place. That evening, she sat with her mother and brother in the hospital room where her mother was recovering from her latest treatment. The medical bills had been crushing, but Daniel had quietly arranged for his company's health foundation to cover the remaining costs. Another debt Nia would find ways to repay. "So what now?" Marcus asked. "You're like famous. You could work anywhere." "I don't know yet," Nia admitted. "Part of me wants to jump back into consulting, prove I never lost my edge. But another part wants something different. Something quieter." "You've earned quiet," her mother said gently. "But don't choose hiding again. Choose peace, yes, but not invisibility." "What's the difference?" "Peace is being comfortable with who you are. Invisibility is being afraid of being seen. You spent 6 years invisible. Time to find peace instead." The wisdom settled over Nia like a blessing. Her mother was right. She'd been hiding, not healing. Now she had the chance to actually build a life instead of just surviving one. 2 weeks after Thornton's arrest, Nia accepted the CFO's job offer, but with conditions. She'd work as an independent consultant rather than an employee, maintaining autonomy over her projects and schedule. She'd focus on ethical corporate security, helping companies protect themselves without exploiting others. And she'd speak publicly about her experience, helping other wrongfully accused professionals find justice. The night before starting her new role, Daniel took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant in the city. They'd stayed in touch throughout the investigation's aftermath, their connection deepening from crisis alliance into genuine friendship. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To truth and justice, Nia replied, clinking her glass against his. And to people who stand beside you when everything falls apart. You would have done the same for me. Actually, you already did 6 years ago, and you returned the favor. I'd say we're even. They talked late into the evening about everything and nothing, corporate strategy, family stories, future plans, past regrets. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, like people who'd known each other far longer than weeks. As they walked to his car afterward, Daniel asked the question he'd been holding. What do you think you'll remember most about all this? The vindication? The justice? Nia considered carefully. Honestly, I remember the moment in that van when I watched them arrest Thornton. Not because of revenge or satisfaction, but because I realized I'd survived something designed to destroy me. I bent, but didn't break. That strength came from somewhere deep that I didn't even know existed. It was always there. You just needed a reason to access it. Maybe hiding taught me resilience I wouldn't have developed otherwise. Silver lining to trauma, it shows you what you're made of. They reached the car, but neither moved to get in. The night air was cool, the city lights bright around them. Can I ask you something? Daniel said quietly. Anything. Are you angry? At the people who framed you, the colleagues who abandoned you, the system that failed you. Are you carrying anger? Nia thought about it honestly. Some days, yes. But mostly I feel relieved. And grateful. Relieved that the truth came out. Grateful that I get a second chance. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend rebuilding. That's remarkably mature. Or maybe I'm just too tired to stay angry, she laughed. Ask me again in a year when I've slept properly. Daniel smiled, then grew serious. For what it's worth, you've changed how I see corporate leadership. The courage you showed, choosing truth over safety, protecting others even while protecting yourself. That's the kind of integrity I want to bring to my own company. You already have that integrity. You believed me when you didn't have to. You made it easy to believe. Your actions spoke louder than any accusations against you. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through settling between them, not as burden, but as bond. Well, Nia said eventually, I should get home. Big day tomorrow. Back in the corporate world. How does it feel? Terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Like standing at the edge of something new. You're going to be brilliant. We'll see. But at least this time, I'm not hiding who I am. The next morning, Nia woke early and dressed carefully, professional attire that felt both foreign and familiar after years in waitress uniforms. She stood before her mirror, practicing her introduction. Nia Carte. I specialize in corporate security and crisis management. The words felt powerful. True. Hers. She removed her waitress uniform from the closet, the clothes she'd worn at Murphy's Diner during her years of hiding. For a moment, she considered throwing them away, erasing that chapter completely. But then she folded them carefully and placed them in a box marked memories. Not everything from those 6 years deserved destruction. She'd learned things in that diner. About resilience. About humanity. About finding dignity in any circumstances. Those lessons were worth keeping. As she drove toward her first day at the new job, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Richard Thornton sentenced to 23 years in federal prison for corporate espionage conspiracy. Justice. Finally, fully, completely. Nia didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired, relieved, and cautiously hopeful. The long nightmare was over. The healing could begin. She parked outside the office building and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Through the windows, she could see people moving between cubicles and conference rooms, the corporate world she'd once navigated so confidently. She could do this again. She could reclaim her place. She could be Nia Carter, the consultant, instead of Nia Carter, the waitress, or Nia Carter, the disgrace fraud. Just Nia Carter. Professional. Capable. Free. She stepped out of the car in a morning sunlight, removed her waitress apron. Not literally, but metaphorically, and walked forward into the life she'd thought was lost forever. The pause was over. Her story was continuing, and this time, she was writing it herself. If you discovered evidence that could restore everything you'd lost, but exposing it meant risking the people you love most, would you choose justice or safety? Like and subscribe for more stories about courage, redemption, and the price of truth.